Good morning, good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our first of ICDM's PowerTalk series of the year. Today's session, Board Leadership in Industry Disruption, Steering Companies Through Market Shift, will be led by Dan Wong, Asia AI Forum Director at the Conference Board. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nisa, and I'm delighted to be your MC for this program. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few housekeeping notes to observe. You may raise your question during the Q&A session at the end of the program. Kindly raise your hand to do so. Slido and audience engagement platform will be used to get feedback from participants on related questions from each module. Please have your mobile phone ready to scan the QR code on the screen. The restrooms are located outside of the ICDM lobby area. Gents on the left and ladies on the right as you exit the main entrance. In case of an emergency, please use the emergency exit doors outside of the whole area. Please follow the instructions given by the ICDM team. The fire evacuation plans are at all exits, and ICDM have internal fire marshal to assist if anything. At the end of today's program, we'll share a QR code for your feedback and complete copy of presentation slides and your e-certificate that will be made available in your ICDM Plus portal upon completion of the feedback survey. So ladies and gentlemen, today's session will equip board members with the strategic insights needed to effectively lead, govern, and support their organization through industry disruption. By the end of this session, you will gain key insights into the board's role in driving transformation and fostering innovation. You will also understand emerging industry disruption, effective governance strategies, and how to balance risk and reward in transformation initiatives. Additionally, you will learn from real-world corporate case studies to enhance your decision-making and strategic leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to briefly introduce our speaker for today. Dan Wong is an expert in the field of digital transformation, AI change management, and innovation with over 20 years of experience in Greater China, Asia, and Silicon Valley. Dan has been at the forefront of driving digital transformation at companies like Nokia, feature phone to smartphone transition, Samsung, hardware to software transition, and at MTR Corporation, where he was the GM of Global Innovation. Across all of these initiatives, the most difficult part of change has always been the human dimension. As CEO of Gift.ed, Dan is using the power of technology to provide courseware and employee engagement that unleashes the potential of organization at scale. All right, without further delay, please welcome Dan Wong.
Great, thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Latha, Nisa, others for having me, and welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. Clearly, I think the topic of digital transformation is an interesting topic. And what I'll share today is a bit of the learnings from my over 10 years doing transformation. And I think in theory, that you've heard, like in theory, transformation, innovation is easy, but in practice it's so hard. And so what I spend more of my time today is talking a bit about where it doesn't work. And there's no free lunch. Sometimes I ask myself after these 10 years, why am I still doing this? Because it's very, very painful. But at the same time, it's so important. So I think this is closed doors. I want to share as much as I can. Please, during the session, I mean, this is just sharing of stories. And anytime you have you want to say something, if you disagree, please just go ahead, raise your hand, and interrupt. I think we can keep it very, very interactive. And so I welcome any kind of comments. There's no necessarily single playbook for transformation, right? And so I think but there is a lot of learning. So I'll share some learnings from like 10 years of doing transformation at places like Nokia, Samsung, and a very traditional company called MTR. So let's talk a little bit about that as we go. And this is kind of given as from the perspective of a practitioner. Many of you are on the board. This is lots of the things I wish the board can support, or I wish the board knew a little bit of this to make it more successful. And so I think that's why I'm also so excited to be able to talk a little bit, because I think many of you are in a position to make a difference here. And so I think I'll go into a little bit and also love to share some stories. I know there are many in the audience yourselves who have been through a transformation journey. So I'll bring a bit of some of the learnings from that. And let me try to start first with the question. And look, transformation, really, is that really needed? Digital transformation has been around for over a decade. We're all digital now. Why bother? We've already done with our transformation journey. So I want to address some questions here. Lots of people might feel that, look, is the industry really changing so quickly? Is it really happening? I think many of us, I think some of us included, sometimes we get pitched by lots of consulting firms and solution providers, and maybe kind of creating some fear that doesn't exist. But is it really there? And I think that's a really true question. Maybe we say in Silicon Valley, think first principles, right? So anything you look at something, you think about like from the first assumptions. So the first assumption is the assumption of the title today, industry transformation. Do we really even need to worry about that? So we start there first, okay? And certainly in some cases, the history of digital transformation is not a very successful history. So you see many people, many companies do transformation. Success rates are not necessarily that high. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So really why bother? Like I said today, there's never a free lunch. And so if you ask people, do you want to innovate? Of course, yes. But there's a cost. And I want to talk about something called the innovator's dilemma, right? Which is very interesting. I don't know how many have heard of the innovator's dilemma. It's actually a very interesting theory that is very interesting because some practitioners that I work with, they actually don't know. So I want to maybe say a little bit, what's the core challenge here of transformation? What's the trade-off? What are you actually trying to do? Right? I come from a technology background, so I'm very, very biased. Right? So I always feel like, technology is a solution. I spent 14 years working and living in China. And if you're from China, you kind of come up with a history of technology has really helped, right? But that's not necessarily the case. So it's really technology a false hope in some ways. And as we go beyond the technology industry to more traditional, right, really does it work, right? So anyhow, I think, and by the way, the board doesn't get involved in all this implementation. What's the role of the board, right? So I think there are lots of questions I want to start with. Starting first with the question, do you even need to bother with today? Certainly I'm very biased. And so I think what we can start today is just maybe, I'd love to hear from you too. So I'm going to have two polls. So if you take out your phone, the first, I want to know a little bit this. The question is, and to what extent have all of you here been on a digital transformation journey? And I think I do need to authorize. Okay, so I need to authorize the Slido so that the choices come out. So let me do that. Okay. All right, and so let me do, but there will be a couple of choices here once the Slido gets loaded. Give me 1 second. So there'll be two polls. And so the first question is this one. Okay, all right, so let's go. All right, so a couple, if you scan the QR code, please place your vote. I mean, there are a couple selections, right? So really, to what extent has you and your organization embarked on digital transformation, right? Some of you would say, we have already completed our journey. We're done. Maybe some of you, you're right in the middle of the battle. Some of you are, have thought about it, have done lots of planning, and now you're right about to embark on the transformation. Some are evaluating, do you want to proceed? Some have no plan. So this would be very useful to know, where are all of you in this journey of digital transformation that's been around us for many, many years. So I'm going to wait a little bit so that all of you can finish voting. I do see some answers coming in. Oh, very interesting. Okay. I must say I'm not sure I expected this. Okay, but let me just wait, and then we can then show everybody the results. Oh, interesting. Okay. Have you all done voting? I'll show the results, which I just saw. Okay, so let's see. You know what? I didn't expect that. Lots of times when they give this talk, I mean, they're really 66% in the midst of digital transformation initiative. That's very high. Oh, so it's okay. So now we're like 67. 67%. Thank you. So I think then you know some of the pain I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some pain and maybe some ways to make the pain go a bit lower. You're not going to you're going to make a little bit less of the pain and increase your rate for success. Okay, very interesting. Okay, all right, I didn't expect that. Okay, in this case then, I'll do this question. Okay, so since so many of you are in the midst of transformation initiative, there's going to be a next question. I'm very curious to know, and I'm sure that in the midst there's a wide range. So let me go to the next question, which is this. To those of you who are on the journey, those of you who are maybe completed your journey, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like, wow, this really exceeded my wildest expectations? Right? This is really changing the business. It could be, yeah, all right, okay, it met expectations, or maybe it's a mixed bag. Maybe some areas good, some bad, so it met expectations. Some areas it's below expectation. It really, all this resources we put in, just not worth it. All the disruption, not worth it. Okay, so below expectations. To some, hey, we just started. We just started, too early to judge. So I'll give you a chance also to vote there as well. And I'm going to take a look here. Let's take a sneak peek in terms of the results. And then okay. All right, hold on. Okay, I'm seeing. Has everybody voted yet? Okay, all right, so let me look. 56 votes. Aha, okay, all right, okay, interesting. Okay, all right. So I think if you've all voted, then I'll go to the next slide.
Met expectation.
Oh, you're met. Okay, good. I'll keep on the lookout. But I must say, you're in the minority. So okay, so based on this poll, mainly below expectations. Okay, later on, I want to hear also a little bit, right? Because no doubt it's hard. No doubt it is hard. And so I think kind of in a way, this is what today's talk about. Right? I think if you're in the middle of that journey, how do you raise it above? Because it is not easy at all. And I think the first thing is actually what is the objective? And I think sometimes that is not so clear to people because the term digital transformation is so broad. It could be anything. Is it about cost reduction? Is it about making workflows easier? Is it about finding a new business? And I think in a way, these are all within the topic of digital transformation. So I want to share a little bit based on this feedback, kind of maybe some of my observations, doing this with a lot of scars on my back to show. Okay, interesting, okay? So on the one hand, okay, so I think what I hear is pretty typical. We know the importance of doing that. We've put some kind of effort to do some transformation initiatives, but yet it doesn't seem to be bringing the business value. It's almost a bit like AI as well, which is a separate topic. Like AI, you're doing some AI, but is it bringing the business value? But at the same time, really, and this is a survey from not that long ago. This is a survey from 2024, not that long ago. PwC, they do an annual survey of CEOs just to test the expectation. And really, a lot of CEOs kind of feel like, will your business exist in 10 years? That's quite an extreme question. I think I'm also curious how you feel, right, with the organizations that you're leading, right? I mean, so in a way, I mean, if your business wants to survive in 10 years, you've got to do something different, which is what's driving lots of this pressure in a way to do what's called digital transformation. And by the way, it's not really about digital, it's about transforming your business. So it doesn't have to be a digital transformation. But in today's world, I mean, you will be using digital tools, including AI tools. And so that's why I lump it a bit together, right? I want to share maybe some broader observations that I've seen. Things like this, I think there's an interesting kind of a study that's trying to study the average lifespan of a business. And I remember that, and this is kind of going from left to right, it's kind of like in history, And the blue line is a little bit like the average life of a business. And it used to be that a life of your business will exceed your lifetime as a human, right? Because you set one business and you're doing that business forever. Now the basic trend, and you can look at different data points, right? The basic trend is the life cycle of a business is getting smaller and smaller. And if you take a look at that, and there's some projections, I've seen some other data points that the average life is like 15 years. So you will exceed the life of your business for the first time. And so this is a little bit, so if businesses are changing, you can no longer rely on what you have, right? I mean, actually, this is the reason why Nokia and other companies try to transform, is that if you believe the nature of your business is changing, then you need to take some action that goes beyond just building your core business, okay? So that's kind of something, and it's very interesting because I must admit I am also biased, because my background is technology industry. So we tend to be more fast-moving to begin with. And so I think I would feel this a lot more strong. But I think the general trend is exactly that. And a bit of a separate topic, I think AI will make this faster. And I'm starting to see some of this happen already. So I think that's kind of one data point perhaps to share. And it's not just technology. And I think today's world is so complicated. So the job of board members is so complicated. You have to be expert in everything. You have to be expert in AI technology. You have to be expert in geopolitics. You have to manage all your stakeholders, and now more and more the pressure. I think it used to be that the board is governance and oversight. I think now more and more the expectation is that you're a change driver and catalyst. And so I think the pressure now is getting stronger. You have to understand the shifting demographics, and that's hitting all businesses. Regulations are coming. I think there's a little bit of inherent unpredictability that's coming in, and so now organizations have to balance all this. And this is now at the C level, at the board level, in terms of the big issues here, and there's not possible to be an expert in everything, right? So how do you enable organizations to face these kind of challenges? I think that in this next 10 years will be even more serious, right? So it's not just technological change, but lots of this complexity and inherent unpredictability. So how do you navigate in this environment? And so I thought it's like 60 minutes, 90 minutes. I thought, maybe I pick one story to share. I pick one story. And I thought, okay, what is the company I've worked with who has no reason to transform? Why should you bother transforming? Right? I mean, I think maybe for Nokia, it was pretty clear, right? For Samsung, in a way, clear as well, right? These are fast-moving industries, very competitive. But why would, and so I want to share my story of MTR, okay? And this was my job before I moved to KL a bit over a year ago, right? So I ran the global innovation team and transformation for Nokia. For MTR, okay? So I want to share the story of MTR, and I think many of you, I'm sure, have been to Hong Kong, but I want to say a little bit of this story, okay? Because, MTR is a very interesting company, and I think I've lived in Hong Kong myself, but, when the headhunter called me, I thought, really? Why would MTR be interested in me? I know nothing about public transportation. I know nothing about real estate. Why, okay? And so MTR is a very, very, I think in the case of Hong Kong, iconic company. It's actually a global company. MTR is in 9 cities in the world. So headquarters Hong Kong, but we run lines in London. So if you've been to London, Elizabeth line, that's MTR, okay? Stockholm, okay? Australia we run lines in Sydney and Melbourne. In mainland China, it's Beijing, Hangzhou, Macau, 9 cities in the world, okay? MTR is very interesting. MTR is a listed company. It's listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, but it is 75% Hong Kong government owned. So it's a unique mixture of both public and private. And it's interesting, there are very few public transport operators in the world that are profitable. MTR is one of them. And it is one of the very few in the world. It's not powered by tax. It's not like Hong Kong's in tax that pays for MTR. So the very, very unique model called R plus P, railway plus transport. So the core business of MTR is this. The core business is transportation, so it's metro in Hong Kong, high-speed rail, bus, all the transportation, but it's also real estate. So if you've been to Central in Hong Kong, do you remember IFC Tower? IFC 2 is MTR. Actually, that's where I had my interview with the CEO, which I'll talk about later. This is IFC 2, so it's commercial real estate. And if you've been to Hong Kong, I'm sure you've been to one of the MTR malls. MTR runs 16 malls. 16. MTR, if you go to MTR lines, there's like shops inside the MTR. Also parking lot, 100 parking lots, okay? Residential property, about 300,000 units of residential property. And data center. And I didn't know this, MTR is a data center entity called Traxcom. Because if you think about it, when we dig tunnel inside Hong Kong, we lay dark fiber. So therefore, all the telecom operators of Hong Kong is my customer. And a non-insignificant portion of internet traffic of Hong Kong goes through MTR. So very, very interesting company. And if you live in Hong Kong, transportation is really so convenient. So people, like typical person, 2 times MTR. In the morning to work and come back, 2 times. And you might live in an MTR building, park in an MTR parking lot, shop at MTR, okay? So when the headhunter explained that to me, I thought, that's very interesting. So they want to build a new department to drive digital transformation. But I was very skeptical. I almost didn't take the interview, actually. I said, digital transformation, I've done that. I've done that at Nokia, I've done that at Samsung, both very, very determined. Why should I go to like a government organization? And by the way, the CEO is not from outside. The CEO is a lifetime member of MTR. So I thought, what would his mindset be? Why would I go there? So I almost said, I think, thank you, no, right? I think the headhunter was quite persuasive. He said, Dan, aren't you curious? At least meet him. At least meet the CEO and talk a little bit, right? And so I thought to myself, okay, all right. Okay, I didn't know this business was so broad. Maybe I'll just find out more. I mean, if I don't go, I have another friend, right? I know a bit how MTR operates. So by the way, please don't share these slides. I would say, like this slide, please don't share, right? Because this is actually the CEO of MTR. This is Jacob. And this is the person I met at IFC 2 Tower for my interview. Of course, he was interviewing me, but I want to make sure. I want to make sure that this is not just like innovation theater. Lots of companies do transformation just to for PR. Right, you kind of feel good, tick a box, right? You get the pressure off your back, and now you go back to your old business. I don't want that, right? So I thought, are you serious? And I thought, why should MTR do anything? If you take the metro in Hong Kong, it's a monopoly. You can lie down and people will still take the MTR. I mean, you still make money. Really, I mean, you lie down and you make money. Well, really, why bother, right? So I actually asked him. So really, I mean, I asked him, in my mind, I thought, if he doesn't give me the right answer, I'm not going to go here, okay? So I asked, Jacob, why bother? Transformation is very, very painful. Why should you do transformation? Aren't you a monopoly? Okay, and so this is what Jacob said to me. He said, and he would never say this in a public forum, he said, Dan, we're losing innovation at MTR. Which is, in a way, I think if you live in Hong Kong, it's very surprising, right? Because MTR is an iconic company. It's a pride of Hong Kong. I mean, it's if you go to Hong Kong, there's no need to look at the timetable. Because we call it Headway, the metro, less than 2 minutes. Less than 2 minutes. It's like that. And you know how they do that? Some of the technology they use is from several decades ago, because you don't touch the signaling systems. So somehow they're able to run on that. And I must say, when I went to see some of the technology, and it's a shock to me, right, because I come from a technology background, I haven't seen some of that equipment for decades. It's like going back in history. I'm like, wow, you run it like that? And they're able to get the headway less than 2 minutes. Very high respect. So MTR has a DNA of innovation, right? Again, one of the few profitable public transport operators that do not take tax support, right? So he said, Dan, he said the last time, he was a bit joking here, he said, Dan, last time MTR innovated was 20 years ago, he said. You know what that was? Octopus. Do you know what Octopus is? Yes. Octopus, if you know, is the payment card, actually, that was incubated 20 years ago out of MTR. That is actually MTR. So MTR is actually, you can say, fintech now, right? So when it came out 20 years ago, the Octopus card was revolutionary. on two perspectives. It was revolutionary because the technology they used, NFC technology. They used NFC technology, right? So your card, the in Hong Kong, that's like iconic sound in Hong Kong. That's using NFC technology. But even more innovative here, I think, was a business model innovation. Because if you think about it, I mean, you want one card, and you can take that card in any public transportation. And despite how big MTR is, it's still competition. You don't have to take the MTR, you can take the bus, right? So in a way, if you want the card to work, you need competitors to cooperate, right? Which is, right? So actually the innovation is that they set up a whole new company. All the shareholders are the competitors, like the cable car, the boat, all the bus companies into one company. Of course, which 75% is MTR, right? So we're chairman of the board and everything, right? So actually that is Octopus. And so what Jacob said to me, he said, Dan, the type of innovation I want is I want that level of innovation, okay? It's not incremental, I want something new. He didn't mean he want more fintech, but he wanted some more ways to extend the business. So that was the job, if you will, coming in. And I did ask Jacob, I said, Jacob, really, if you don't do anything, people take Metro. But he said this, Dan, maybe not in the short term, but MTR is long planning, right? How about the next 20, 30, 50 years? What's going to happen? And in this case, right, and I think many of you are familiar with ride hailing. Ride hailing, okay? And, and I spent some time in China as well, right? So sometimes, for example, in the morning for me in Shanghai, if I want to go to work, I can take the public transportation, or I can do like Didi, right? Anybody taken public transportation in China? It's not very nice. It's like a lot of people, right? Not nice, okay? And in those days, if you do Didi, and if you do carpooling, Pinza, actually it's not that much more. And it comes to my house, and it drops me off. So there's a viable alternative beyond Metro. So I don't have to take the Metro, right? That's what Jacob said to me. So I said, yes, that's right. So if you are serious, then it's worth to go, okay? And so that's a bit what's happening at MTR. If you look at the outside, I mean, people still feel MTR is innovative, but also, to be honest, having spent some time there, losing a bit the culture. I'll get into that a bit later on, but losing a bit the culture. Also, there's a bit of a threat. What's the threat? Fear of falling behind. In Hong Kong, we're just like I live in Shatin. So Shatin, if I go up to Shenzhen, that's like maybe 20 minutes. It's almost the same if I go to Central, okay? So right across the border, China is at a different speed. And I really feel that because I lived and worked in China for 14 years. And I must say, I have never worked so hard, so fast in my life. Never. I used to work in Silicon Valley. And I thought, Silicon Valley pretty fast. Pretty fast, right? Silicon Valley, fast? Not compared to China. No. So in China, like when you're doing business in China, it's okay, let's talk about this, okay. Oh, let's keep talking. Okay, when do we talk about? Tomorrow morning. Tonight, like that. When I'm in Silicon Valley, okay, when should we talk about this? Like, next Thursday, 3 p.m. I'm like, but of course, the speed of China really it takes a toll, I must say. It takes a toll, very, very, very. But I think that is one of the core reasons for the innovation coming from China. But there's a fear of falling behind. So what MTR did, MTR is I must say, a very Hong Kong company, very honky. So it's international, but it's very honky. So every day in MTR, I speak Cantonese because it's just, right, it's very honky, right, So the most trusted people are the people from Hong Kong headquarters. So we would then, the GMs of Beijing, GMs of Hangzhou are all from Hong Kong. So they'll rotate them, right? And so I think that's so smart because unless you're in that environment, you don't know. And here's the advantage of China. China is greenfield. The reason why China can do, they don't have metro, so they use the newest technology. So whereas we in Hong Kong need to deal with decades-old signaling system, they immediately use the new ones. So actually, you see, they're actually doing better than us. So when I first went to MTR, I was interviewing the GMs, right? And some of the GMs I've returned to Hong Kong. I said, what do you think? And they said, you know what? China's pretty fast. I think they will overtake us in terms of innovation and technology. They will overtake us. They will, right? When I left 4 years later, I asked them the same thing. Some have said to me, please keep, they've already overtaken us. They have already overtaken us. And so a little bit, kind of when I went to MTR, I felt like, okay, MTR might have a window of opportunity. A window, because you're already feeling it a little bit, right? So in the past, if you're building a metro line, you always ask MTR. Today, we're not so sure. I mean, would you want to ask like Shanghai, what they're doing? I mean, right? So I think you're already feeling that switch. So please look at this. This is a very traditional public transportation business facing this, okay? And so this is kind of the subtext on the day that I went. So I moved to Hong Kong for this. Back then, I was still living in China, okay? So of course, my family, I have family members in Hong Kong. So I moved to Hong Kong for this job. So this December 8, 2019 is the first day on the job. This is the picture from my house in Shatin. Out on the right-hand side, I told my friends in China why I'm going to Hong Kong. So that's like WeChat. Hey, I'm going to Hong Kong, and people saying, hey, good job, yeah, right? You're going to, right? All the best, good luck, which of course I will need. And I was really quite excited for this opportunity. So I thought, if I want to make a change, this platform is incredible. It touches everybody's life in Hong Kong. And if they are serious, there is definitely a way to bring it up, and it has a global, right? So global reach. I was also, so this is the job. My job was just 2 jobs. Job number 1, help our existing business, Engine 1. How do we adopt technology? How do we think about new ways forward? How do we protect and enhance our existing business? And then number 2 is called Engine 2. Find me another Octopus, another business that's not subject to kind of our current, our current restrictions. So even if maybe we don't get overtaken by other transport operators, we're still competitive. But on top of that, I have another business line, just like Octopus. Octopus is an incredible example, because it's a completely new business line, completely new revenue, but at the same time, it reinforces Engine 1, right? Because of Octopus so easy, I mean, you'll take MTR more, right? And so that's the job. Build Engine 1, also find Engine 2. We call this Curve 1, Curve 2. I'll explain a little bit. But I think if you think about it, this is the job of transformation, is both. Having been through this before, I knew this would not be easy, right? I mean, this sounds great, right? Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, why not have 2 engines? That's a great idea. But nothing comes for free. And I knew this would be uphill battle. I already knew that. I knew this would be uphill battle. I knew I would need to spend lots of time doing stakeholder management. I knew as well I was in a very dangerous position. Why is it dangerous? I'm the GM of global innovation. Wait a second, does that mean that the other guys are not innovative? Very careful here, right? I mean, so in a way, resources, but in some ways you might also be set up for failure, right? So I was very, very cautious here, right? But the opportunity was great, which is why I went to Hong Kong. So that's really the simple thing. You need a new way of innovation forward in order to have 2 engines at the same time. And I think this is a very interesting theory. I want to say a little bit, maybe, I'm going to spend the next couple slides to define the challenge, okay? And then I'll say what we tried to do to fix it, okay? Here's a core challenge. Many of you, I think, are very familiar with this different type of innovation, 0 to 1, 1 to n. Is everybody familiar with that? Because understanding that is really, I think, even at the board level, understanding this is really at the core of it, okay? And so this is Peter Thiel, okay? This is Peter Thiel. Okay, one of the founders of PayPal, right? And so kind of the PayPal mafia from Silicon Valley, right? Along with Elon Musk and others, right? So Peter Thiel said many, many years ago, but you know what? Innovation is not just innovation. There are many kinds of innovation, right? One kind of innovation is called 1 to n, going from 1, right? Let's call it incremental continuous innovation. And actually, that's where lots of companies are very strong, very strong. MTR, very strong with incremental innovation, okay? But then he said there's something called disruptive or breakthrough innovation, 0 to 1. Actually, the insight there is that that's a whole different methodology. It's a different mindset. So in other words, if you're trying to do both kinds of innovation, you have a different system. Think about it. So Engine 1 is 1 to n. Engine 1 is 1 to n. Like all the processes in your company well suited. But now you're trying to do 0 to 1. that goes against the grain of all the processes in your organization. So I think that the key insight here is that it's a completely different system. Sometimes you need a different personality to do it, actually. It's a different corporate culture. And I want to share a little bit, a slide here, at least the way that I visualize this. And this is a typical product, and I used to be a product manager in Silicon Valley. This is a very, very product view of things. And in a way, I think that all companies are product companies because all companies provide a product or a service. And from that extent, this is kind of a methodology. So this is a very typical product management graph. So if you go from left to right, here are the different phases of a company or a service, right? So from left, so on the left-hand side, 0 to 1, this service never existed before. It's all new. And so then up and down is how many people are using it. So that's a number of users is up and down. One good example is this. I was in Silicon Valley, and then one of my industry friends said to me, hey, Dan, there's a new company coming up. They have a very interesting idea. Their idea is that, like, you have a car, right? But then you don't drive it. And so why don't you, like, be a taxi driver and drive other people around? I mean, so that's the idea. And I thought, that is the most stupid idea I ever heard. I'm not going to, like, drive my car around and, like, take strangers in my car, right? Guess what? Uber, right? I mean, so 0 to 1, something but that's your typical example. That's 0 to 1. The whole business model doesn't exist. Okay, so then you go through that. Okay, and so if you cross the valley of death, then you start getting mass adoption in the same way that Uber did. When Uber first started, nothing, unproven, hard to get VC funding, but then you start getting to a certain level of users, and now you're 1 to N. So now you use incremental innovation. You add features, you do that, right? And I think our topic for today is the third phase, is our topic today. Our topic today is you're already a big company. You already have your existing business. You now are looking for your next curve. So actually, if you look at this picture, so that's the challenge. You need to, on the one hand, preserve current business and grow something new. That's the core of the challenge here. That's the core of the trade-off. And this is the way that I see it is like this. So like if you go 0 to 1, like a lot of times small companies, they're the ones that are doing that because in a way they have no other choice to compete, right? So they're doing all right. Right. But then when you're a large company with existing business, the challenge then becomes N to M plus 1, and the challenge is simply like curve 1, curve 2. Curve 1, achieve some improvement in your core business. You have to keep innovating. Curve number 2, you need to find quickly as possible new business. So a lot of our work in innovation is trying to find that portfolio. What's the right bet? This is the reason why lots of companies do corporate venture capital. Where do you find those ideas to create this curve number 2? And so today's topic is really around a little bit this curve number 2, right? And this is this trade-off here. All right, so this looks great, doesn't it? Let's have curve 1 and curve 2. But here's the trade-off. Here's why this is so difficult. There's something called innovator's dilemma. And this is a very famous professor from Harvard called Clayton Christensen. Very famous. I actually took his class when I was in Harvard many, many years ago. Very well known. And what he noticed was something very interesting. He said, why is it so hard to innovate? Why are all these big companies failing? And it was across all industries, across all geographies. And so he did a lot of research. And he kind of found a common root cause. And he called this root cause the innovator's dilemma. So anybody looking to do N to M plus 1 transformation, this is the crux of the problem, okay? So this is from Clayton Christensen, the innovator's dilemma. So think about it this way, 0 to 1. 0 to 1 innovation is extremely irresponsible. Why is it irresponsible? Okay, well, look, if you're doing something 0 to 1 from scratch, you haven't done it before, hey, look, it's low quality, okay? I mean, you haven't done it before, right? So you're not going to build everything. It's not going to be perfect, and so it's going to be low quality. You haven't done it before. Can you guarantee to me, Dan, this will work? I'm sorry, I can't guarantee it. High risk, okay? Dan, and I've been through many of these discussions, okay? So Dan, this proposal you have, is a high margin? No, in the beginning, okay? Dan, how big is your TAM? Your total addressable market, right? Not sure, okay? Dan, is this proven? No, okay. Here's very interesting. These are the typical questions that a very responsible manager. Look, I went to business school. You're trained to ask these responsible questions. And usually, after you ask this, that's the end. Okay, you're done. That's the problem. So all these factors are the exact opposite of all your governance, isn't it? It's the exact opposite. Why would you do it? That's the problem. Okay, if you're a startup, you have no choice, right? And startup land is very painful, I must also say as well. So right, I mean, you see some of the successful startups. For each startup that's successful, several hundred have failed, really. So you're seeing the tip of the tip, right? And so that's why, this is the reason why startups starting being able to disrupt big companies. It's because of this. But they have no choice. They can't compete with MTR on rail. They cannot compete with IBM. There's no way you can compete, okay? That's the crux. So how do you do this in your company? Think about it, in your organization. When you're at the head of your committee meeting and you're asking these questions, how can you accept this? I think that's the problem, okay? So I knew this going in. I already knew this. So I'm thinking, how do I solve this problem? I know I have board support from MTR. I know that Jacob is behind me. But Jacob can't do everything, right? I know I have a budget, okay? So they already went through the work at MTR to set up a new organization, right? So I'm going to share a little bit, given this challenge, at least how I try to solve it, okay? And I would say also with some mixed results. Okay, so let's see. Okay, right. So let's go. So this is what happens in practice because of that. Engine 1, Engine 2, Engine 1 will always kill Engine 2, always, each time after time again. Because look, imagine yourself in the management meeting, right? I mean, every company's resources are limited. Resources in terms of your funds, management attention time, right, expertise. Any responsible manager will always choose Engine 1. But if you do Engine 1, that means you're not doing Engine 2. It means you can't find the second curve. So now you're waiting. So for example, if you're MTR, now you wait for China to overtake you. So what's the choice? So this is actually the reason why MTR was quite determined to do this, which is the reason I went as well, right? But that's the problem. Okay. So how do I prevent Engine 2 from being killed from day one? By the way, I have both responsibility. So I would say 80% of my responsibility is Engine 1. When I first went to MTR, because MTR is very safety conscious, they don't use unproven technology, such as AI, such as machine learning is not proven, right? So when I first went to MTR, right, they were not using, and by then when I went to MTR, computer vision, I would say, actually that's proven, okay? But they didn't dare use it, right? So I had a bunch of pilots that was doing computer vision for MTR, right? So this is what I tried to do. Okay, so when I went there December 2019, I went there to set up an organization, Outsiders, in order to drive Engine 2. Okay, and here's like what we did internally. On the left-hand side, sustaining innovation, a little bit MTR very strong. No, right? No need. I support. Right? I find new technology. A lot of my power is how do I do engine number 2? And here's the problem, is like in a company, whose responsibility is whose, right? There are lots of like very innovative people in MTR. Why should it be GID driving this, right? And so the first thing I did is let's be very clear what we mean by innovation, okay? And so I think a lot of people in MTR also were not familiar with the concept of 0 to 1 and 1 to n, right? So first was just saying, hey, there's different, okay? And so on the right-hand side is what we try to internally to define what we mean actually by 0 to 1 innovation, right? So one way we did it, and I think here's a problem. There's no real broadly accepted, foolproof way to do it because it's kind of gray. What we did is, from left to right, we said, okay, on this axis, is this technology or capability something that MTR already has, right? So do we already have that? So that's kind of, if you go to right-hand side, that means, okay, we have that. If it's left-hand side, we don't. Then from bottom to up, is the use case clear? So let me explain what this 2x2 is. So upper left-hand, okay, the use case very clear. I want to do predictive maintenance on my rail. However, I have not used computer vision. Okay, therefore that's breakthrough. Okay? Now, on the lower right-hand corner is maybe the technology itself is not so new. I mean, I've done a mobile app before, but actually applied in this use case, that's disruptive. Actually, lots of times disruptive is the business model innovation. If you think about also in this industry, like Uber, is Uber using like the newest technology? No, but the business model is very different. And you have to try it first before you know it, so that's disruptive. So we have both. Then we even did research. There's some things that kind of vendors don't offer. And so we spent some time working with universities. So research is use case not clear, actually, and then the technology is new. So that's how we did it. Those 3 boxes is my domain. That's a 0 to 1. And then there's one question. So I had a management committee. And so I was given 200 million Hong Kong dollars annual budget to drive this. So some determination, right? And so this is to do M&A, pay for pilots, okay? And so on the upper right-hand side, if the use case is known, if the technology you know, actually go back to your BU. Has nothing to do with me. That's one to end, right? So we first try to then scope out what. And so the real job here is how do you bring those 3 blocks into the new capability of MTR, right? So if you take a look at the right-hand side, a little bit the capability of MTR is upper right-hand corner, very strong. So how do we bring in 3 new blocks in today's world to adapt to the change? And so that's kind of the first thing is defining what we mean, okay? Trying to fit this within a broader organization. And so this is what we did, and so we kind of tried to do it full on. So these are maybe the 4 big pieces of investment, if you will, to set up this kind of 0 to 1 capability. One is a dedicated organization, global innovation department, actually bringing in some external skills, right? So some of the skills I have is not in MTR. A lot of what we do is we work with the startup ecosystem because a lot of the emerging technology is startups, okay? And so I had to recruit people who know how to work with startups. And so we had a dedicated organization, not a big one. It was meant to be an enabler, right? Not a big one to do that. We had a dedicated fund, 200 million. And by the way, I couldn't finish spending it. Each year I couldn't finish spending it. Each year they asked, Dan, you need, right? So just spending that amount, right? Then I think the next 2 come to a bit of the governance. I knew that you're not going to like try everything. You need to have some kind of a governance, and this governance is a bit different. I'll explain what this governance was. You can't just like approve everything, right? You can't just put a lot of money in here. 200 million is a lot of money, and I know I'm going to be asked very quickly, was this money well spent? How do you do that? So we set up a new governance process, if you will, to do this, and then we actually helped MTR find sources. I mean, I think those of you in big companies, you probably know this. If you're using technology, lots of times the technology coming from your vendor, it's not their technology. They're using the startup company's technology. So, and then they mark it up a couple times. And then, because they're big vendors, I mean, some of these big vendors at MTR are very big, right? So you have to negotiate with them. They're not gonna like build anything you want, right? But if I went directly to the startup, low cost, and they'll do anything for you, right? So anyhow, so those are the 4 big pieces to try to add this capability into MTR. And I think the one I might want to spend a bit more time talking about is the governance. Because there's lots of questions, right? Like, okay, yeah, I mean, I understand that I'm trying something, and it might fail. I understand that, but do I accept all failure? Am I accepting all the failures that come? What if nothing, right? What's the KPI? I mean, what's the ROI? How long, right? How do you measure this, right? So these are all very, very relevant questions to manage this process. So that's kind of what that was about. And so this is what this is, okay? So this is a bit of a process that's inspired by, to those of you who do development work, it's inspired by agile development, right? And agile development is a little bit, here's a spirit of agile innovation, and I want to say a little bit, an example. Let me give an example. In MTR, before the formation of Global Innovation Department, if you want to propose a new pilot, if you want to propose something new, you'll have to spend a lot of time writing the paper. The paper is very thick. It's a very thick paper, right? And then you schedule time several months in advance to get onto the executive committee, okay? And you spend a lot of time, survey everything, and it's all proven, and then you go to the forum, and then they, of course, they'll ask you the first question. Dan, is this proven? If it's not proven, it's actually the end. That's the end. That's thank you, bye-bye. That's it, right? Right. And so, right. But the whole idea is that you do a lot of preparation in front. you analyze everything, you're very smart, and then that's how you manage risk, and then you approve it, right? And then it's very interesting, after you get the funding, I think MTR is pretty typical, they don't follow you. So you got the funding, right? And then you do it. Nobody's asking you, Dan, did you really like X, Y, Z? So, but that's the process. The agile process is the opposite, okay? And the agile process is, okay, don't spend time writing that document. Like 10 slides. 10 slides. Tell me what your learning objective is. And then maybe this proposal, okay, I'll split into 3 phases. So I'll give you a little bit of the money up front. Then I want to see, did you make some progress? And then that's how I control the rest, right? So what I set up was, if those, I don't know if this is in Malaysia, there's a very popular show in the West called the Shark Tank. Okay, so this process is this. Every 2 times a month, any person, any department in MTR Global, they can create a proposal, come to my forum. So I set up a new EC, a new executive committee forum, okay? And I did recruit lots of the top guys to come be my executive committee member, right? And so anybody globally at MTR can come up with their proposal. I even provide you with this template of 10 slides. And you know what I did? Sometimes I even write it for you, because everybody's very busy. So you write, so we help them to do this. And so they come in, and we very quickly approve. So like our meeting is about, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Every time maybe we have 2 proposals. And then the proposal may be like a 45-minute proposal, some question, then we approve like that. Just like that, okay? And I ask the same question. So my first question when you come to this, this is called the TISC forum. My first question was, team, is this proven? Actually, it's a trick question. Okay. So I ask them, is this a proven technology, proven approach? If they say yes, I say, thank you, goodbye. You go back to your BU, right? Because you're equipped to do that, right? So people, when this first time, were like shocked, like, right? People were also shocked when we said that this is to learn. So I said to people, we accept failure. We accept failure. Of course, when you say this in organizations, nobody believes you. I must be honest here. I mean, I've been in many, many organizations that everybody says, hey guys, we need to innovate. We're gonna like learn, we're gonna fail, so don't worry. Like go, and then nobody dares. No, and then you look at the person who will fail, and then you see what happens. Okay? So in general, like saying it doesn't help. So I had to build some credibility, right? So I got some early, and some did fail, and then, but the key is actually this: did you learn something? So the whole KPI was around that. What's your learning objective? I learned very early in this to be very careful with the term KPI. Okay? So when I said, okay, so when they give the proposal, right, then you have to have some outcome, right? You have to have an outcome. So, right, I mean, even if you're learning, you have to have an outcome. And I found that was a very big barrier. People did not want to come to the forum. Because a KPI word in MTR is very serious. You sign your blood to that. And so I had to like educate and say, no, this is not KPI, this is a learning objective. What is your learning objective, right? And so it took some time and I did lots of internal roadshows, right, to allow people to believe that, right, number, there's money here and how do we play, and so I think there's some education process, but this is what was set up. And I must say that this occurred in 3 phases. So when this first started, like a flood of proposals, too many. So I had to say, I'm sorry, can you wait for the next meeting? Because we're already full for this, right? So in the beginning, and then you know what happened after that? Nothing. 0. There were meetings that was like nobody came. I mean, how embarrassing is that? I mean, right? I'll explain a little bit why, right? But a little bit is, you know, hey, I mean, so the first phase is like, because there's lots of important projects, there's actually no budget in the EC for that. So that's why when this came out, it tapped into, and they did fill the criteria. But then after that, I mean, it's not my job. Why should I do anything, right? I'll go into this later on. Do you know the thing I heard most when I first went to MTR? She'll say, the less I do, the less I fail. In Cantonese, 喂釘哥啊，唔好搞我啦，少做少錯啦，係嘛? Really, the less I do, the less I fail. Really, look, think about it. If you're in the working level, if you don't say anything, well, life is fine, and you know you go home and everything's fine. Nobody's gonna like blame you for not doing something new. But let's say you're brave enough to like say, hey, can we use like computer vision? And then if anything fails, isn't that on you? Why should you be the first person to prove out whether or not management is serious when they say like failure is okay, right? Let's wait for your next promotion, right? So very hard. So for a long time, my job is actually like going around with a tin cup. It's very interesting. Think about it. I have money. It's my money. 200 million. I have the money in many cases. And I knew the challenge. So I had my team find the solution. I already found the solution. Oh, you're too busy? I write the paper for you. I wrote the paper. And then no. Because they also have to work it up. They need their management too, right? So anyhow, so hard. So I have everything. I go around begging people. And you look for the champion. Because in companies, everybody, if you say, should we innovate, should we do something new? Everybody's yes. Then when you actually want to do a project, then very few, right? So I had to spend a lot of time finding it, right? So you have to spend time. I spent a lot of time building some credibility, some successes, fortunately. And then the third phase right before I left was getting a bit back like that. So I think some things, after you do it for a while, people get more used to it. They see it, they feel that maybe I should do something. So there's a bit of a culture change that came from this too. But I must tell you, there were days I woke up and I said, what am I doing here? Why am I working so hard? Because people, they didn't appreciate it. Like leave me alone. So actually, I can do nothing too, right? So I said, why am I working so hard? I'll just have a coffee today. Well, why should I keep pushing people? Because sometimes when you push people a bit, they don't really appreciate it. So I'm telling you, hey, why don't you use this? And they're like, no. Right? So anyhow, that's a bit of the internal work that's required to make this work. So anyhow, but there's a system in place. So the idea here is that I knew I had to set up a separate system. It can't just be free-flowing, okay? And you have to have metrics to measure it, okay? By the way, I'm not going to explain what this is. I knew I have to mix together engine 1 and engine 2. How do I take that new process I just done? How do I put that into the standard governance process? So this is where very involved, lots of internal discussions. How do I bring the GID 0 to 1 process into the main process? So we had to work with all the different champions, and we had a process in place to go from 0 to 1 to 1 to N, okay? Including things like setting up MTR Lab. We did stuff like corporate venture capital, which is a separate story, so corporate venture capital, and how do we start building up that process? So this is a view of the internal process we came up with, okay? So I think we set up that process. How do we measure this? And I struggle with this. How do you measure innovation, okay? And so we approached it in 2 ways. So phase 1, let's just look at your action, okay? In a culture where the less you do, the less you fail, can I at least get you to propose? So the first metrics were really quantitative, like a number of projects submitted to committee. Not even approved, but just submitted. Okay, so we've taken the actions. How many were submitted? How many were approved? And by the way, part of what we're trying to do in innovation is kind of come up with our own IP. So do we file patents? So we had 3 simple measures. But I think that's not really what you're after, because you're just measuring the input. You're just measuring the action, right? But that's the most clear. And what we're starting to move towards in the next phase was more qualitative. What is the quality of this? So how many were actually put into production, right? That's a very clear one. You tried it, and now you put it into production. Because this is a learning process, how many went to the next phase? So maybe the first phase failed, but you learn, hey, but it's still interesting. I'm going to try the next test. That's success, right? Then very clear things like, were you able to save cost? Were you able to raise productivity? Were you able to fulfill some strategic objective, which could be our ESG roadmap or something else? But I will tell you something. That is good in thinking, nothing wrong with that. Hard in practice, because some of these pilots take time. Some of the pilots would take over a year. This is very different from what I'm used to. Normally in a technology environment, your pilot is 6 months and you're done. These ones take a year, some a year and a half. So as so often happens, after a year, 2 years, I start getting asked questions by the board and by the CEO. Dan, what's our ROI? Yeah, nice. Hey, Jacob, we have 200 projects and blah, blah, blah. Dan, but how much have actually bring value? So very often, I think this has been my experience, it's sometimes easier for the CEO or a company to hold off for maybe 2 years, right? You keep it right. But after 2 years, the hard questions come. And when that comes, I think that is the choice, and this is the judgment call then by the board. Do you continue or not? Because actually, at that point, you won't know. I cannot show you the proof, right? If you look at what technology companies are doing, you'll notice some of the pivots take a long time. Here's an example. Many of your companies are using Amazon AWS, right? Amazon Web Services. By the way, a separate question, like when Amazon said they're going to do AWS, their stock tanked. It's not the core competency, right? People like think it's not going to work. Do you know how long it took AWS to become a core business? Do you know? 10 years. 10 years. So you're asking, so this is what Amazon did not do. 2 years of AWS, hey, AWS, are you making money? No. Go, right? That takes some bravery, okay? Because you don't really know how long you're waiting. Are you waiting another year? Are you waiting 5 years or something else? This is the crux of the problem, right? So in an area of uncertainty, how do you continue with this? Because it is an investment, $200 million a year, okay? You have to answer. And many of you are in public companies. It's not just you, it's how about your fiduciary duty to your stock price, right? And so I think that's really the difficulty. It is hard to measure. So even for me, I had some success cases, I did. But then, okay, of your projects, like 5 of those got like a 10%, okay, yeah, but you add the numbers, right? So I think the measurement here is useful. I'm showing you a little bit what we did, but there's no perfect measure, right? So in some measures, if you look at that, pretty good, okay? In terms of success rate, 59%. Actually, the 2 ways to look at this. Actually, I'm going to ask you, hey, success rate of 59%, do you think that's good? What do you think? Good or bad? And what this means actually means it was handed over to BU, went into production, went to the next phase, okay? So here are the 2 ways to look at it. On the one hand, hey, that's not bad. I mean, like startups fail, right? Like 10% success rate, okay, that's pretty good. But on the other hand, think about the challenge. Engine 1, Engine 2. Engine 2 is completely different. If you're coming from more of a startup viewpoint, you're not taking any risk. You're risk averse. You're not really giving enough space to Engine 2, right? So anyhow, 2 ways to look at even that metric, right? But also for me, within MTR to survive, I have to have something like that. Otherwise, thank you, let's reduce your budget. All right, let's reduce your time. And we did a lot of stuff. This is like full-on job, okay? So by the way, these metrics, I wasn't naive in terms of KPIs for corporations. I made that into the group KPI. So MTR have something called a core incentive scheme. Okay? So core incentive scheme is where every single employee of MTR, from Jacob CEO all the way to manager level, this is your yearly bonus. This is your yearly bonus scorecard. So I put that as one of the measures into the yearly scorecard. Okay, not a lot. It's like 5% weighting, but 5% weighting in a scorecard like that, right? And it raises the revenue. It does help. But at the same time, so I thought actually it helped, but not as much as you would think. It said help, but it's at least on there. So that's a small piece. I did like everything. I do workshops. I do lunchtime, lunch and learn, innovation talks. I even did like a 3-day tech fair in MTR Kowloon Bay. Because I think like many people in MTR, they're very curious about the outside world, right? They want to see what are startups doing, what are they thinking, right? So they're very curious. So part of what I do, I would take them to go to Cyberport or Hong Kong Science Technology Park to visit startups, right? But even then, I mean, Hong Kong is a very small place, but even then, you just don't have time. It takes you a half day. You have to go there and go right, so half day. So what I did is I brought all the startups to MTR Kowloon Bay headquarters. I brought 30. It almost killed my team. They'll never do it again, right? But it's like we had to coordinate, and so you don't have to do anything. You walk into MTR, and so you'll do that. It was a tech fest. And MTR is very interesting because you have to, I thought, okay, it would be a lot of work, but it was more work than I thought. Because at MTR, you have to do everything right. Oh, Dan, what is a food and beverage? I'm like, what? Food and beverage? Oh, yeah, you have free lunch. Right, or you have to give some rewards, and then, so it was a massive project. So at the end of that 3-day fair, it was successful, by the way, very successful. But my team, they're not going to do it again. It's just too much, right? But successful. And here's going back to KPI. So I thought, okay, my purpose for doing this, I want to bring proposals to my process, to the Shark Tank. I want to bring it in. So I had a proposal. You know, sometimes the things that, you know, and I was organizing both. So my job is both bring results, but also culture change. So Jacob said to me, Dan, we need culture change, and which is really vague, which is everybody, right? And if you look at the tech fair, from pure output, I would say it failed. Because I think I thought if I brought all these startups, how can you walk by and not have a thinking? So here's the thinking, right? Because MTR is very, very top-down driven. So when I do like the startup trips to Cyberport, like the directors don't go. They don't have time, they don't go, right? But if a director walks by, then say, oh, that's interesting, hey, you do it. And in MTR, if the director says, it just gets done, right? So I was thinking, okay, 3 days, give me at least like 10 projects. 10, right? That's not a lot to ask for. 10 projects to my Shark Tank, you know what I got? Got 3. I'm like, okay. But on the other hand, I think it helped culture change. So I helped down the road, if you remember what I said, like, you know, by the time I was about to leave, and this is 3 years in, we started getting a lot more proposals. I did everything. I mean, you know, like MTR has like you know, people like reward, right? So MTR have an annual award ceremony. It's very big. It's have you been to the Hong Kong Convention Center in Wan Chai? Beautiful. We rent the whole place out, and it's global. All of our people from like London, they all dial in, and it's like everybody's dressed really nice, and it's got dinner, right? And so what I did is I put in Breakthrough Innovation Award. It's one of the categories in there, right? And I think many of you are familiar working in big companies. I thought, okay, not so hard to do, right? I mean, you know, like the board is supportive. Jacob likes it. My boss, like, what's wrong with the innovation award? Let's do that. You know how much time that took me? It took me a lot of time. I thought I had to convince all these people, and yet this and that, and no. It wasn't even much money. I mean, you know, I wasn't even asking for money. And so everything takes some effort. So it took a lot more time than I thought. But it's stuff like that that brings a bit, right? So it's like a full-on game, like everything, right? To try to change the culture. Okay. And this is a very typical slide you'll see in the innovation forums, which is something called 3 horizons, right? But the idea is very simple. If you look at your company's business as a portfolio of different businesses, you can think about it like some is like your engine one, your core business. Then let's say you don't want to go too crazy. So you want to do like some additional business that's a little bit different, right? And then horizon 3 is like the crazy stuff. Like you do octopus, right? You're not in financial services and you do octopus. So the idea here is that you're trying to manage your portfolio, put a bit of resources in the different horizons, right? And so it doesn't have to be 10, 20, 70, but it's a typical thing today. So a little bit the objective as well was to create a portfolio of potential projects and businesses for MTR. So we did like this portfolio theory, right? So we had all of those, right? And again, my engine one responsibility was most of it. So I spent, right? So the measure about 70% of my time helping the core business, right? And they had to be very, very targeted in terms of the top horizon, disruptive. And they did. In my almost 4 years with MTR, I think the business model change, with lots of hard work, I was able to find 4. Okay. And if those of you go to Hong Kong, look for a store in MTR Mall called Louder. It doesn't look like MTR, but that was one that's incubated, right? And so it started from nothing, now it's deployed in most of the MTR malls. It's actually MTR operating that and doing, right? So anyhow, that's a bit the portfolio. So okay, what's the result? Like I was there 3.5 years, okay? I think cumulatively I did about over 120 pilots. And these are technology pilots. These are like business model pilots, things of that sort. And so from that perspective, yeah, not bad. I mean, 120 projects trying. I mean, these are all projects that would not have existed without this governance. And we did all sorts of things. I mean, for a while last year, like Web3, NFTs, that type of it was hot. We've done stuff like that too. Blockchain. We actually built a metaverse station in the metaverse called the Sandbox. Okay. So all sorts of things, and each one is a story. Actually, the story behind that could be a digital revenue stream, was the idea, right? So anyhow, so lots of projects. And I know we're running on time here, so I want to share a little bit, also some pain, okay? So do you really need 2 systems? And I think a little bit, my observation is this. So engine one, when we talk about management, it's always the stick and the carrot. Like how do you motivate your team? You reward them or you punish them, right? Right. And I think for engine one, you can use a stick. Yeah. Think about, can you use a stick for engine two? I mean, this requires somebody passionate, thinking about something. So lots of the stuff that came by engine two, like management would never have thought of that. But it's that person that sat down thinking, so how do you find that, right? So that's why the system is different. Lots of our management systems, I must be honest, is very much the stick, okay? And is right, and so that's kind of why, in my opinion, you have to have two systems. Very quickly, I want to share with you some further pain, right? Because I think it's important for a board, really. I mean, when you give the edict to people like me, like what do we face? What are the challenges that we face? And are there ways maybe you can help make it easier? My feeling is this. I think transformation is very, very difficult. And, it's difficult to begin with. But if there's some support in the right way, it could really help the teams doing it, right? And so I want to share like the best laid plans of mice and men, and it goes wrong, okay? This one I talked about already, so I won't repeat. I heard that all the time. It's very, very demotivating. Can I say this to Jacob? No way in hell. I'm not going to use that as an excuse to Jacob, okay? So, but that's the truth, right? Well, yeah, why bother? Because in MTR, it's very serious. If you make an error, you could be in that picture. Questions by the legislator. Why did you why do you irresponsibly use unproven technology? And this accident happened, right? So it's serious. I mean, Jacob could end up on the legislator, right? So there's a reason for that. But if you stay there, you will never get engine two. So sometimes this is really how I feel sometimes. I feel like I keep pushing the rock up, and then the rock rolls back down on you and it crushes you, and then you have to push it up again, right? And by the way, like you're in the trenches, okay? Am I going to escalate everything to Jacob? Of course I can't. I can't, like every problem, I cannot escalate it to Jacob. Jacob can't help me in that way, right? And of course, Jacob, he has to balance everything too, right? So it's a bit, right? So I found very, very quickly that the management support is absolutely needed, but not enough. And and I think in the story that we mentioned today, I think the whole process was trying to do that, right? And here's the thing, I'll call this a corporate jungle. When you do engine two, I think one of the challenges of doing transformation is that your organization lacks the skill set. Can you train up people who are experts in AI? Can you train up people who are ecosystem people? We were doing corporate venture capital. Do you have this kind of expertise in your company? So in a way, you need to bring in some external blood. Like myself, you come in. And I knew this would happen, right? But when you come in, you're like the foreign antibody. You're like a foreign virus. You come in, and then actually the organization reacts to you. And by the way, I just told you, I'm exposing lots of irresponsible behavior. Right, the innovation. I'm coming in and I'm telling you to do this, and so the antibody response comes out. Right, so here a little bit of safety from the top. I must share. Here's a little bit of my frustration. Different companies are different. There were some critical points of decision. Critical points. I was at the executive committee. Jacob is there, and then MTR is quite complicated. We have 10 directors. Okay, so it's like 11 people. Okay, I make my proposal. I think different people have different management style. Jacob, great guy. He's very consensus driven. Very consensus driven. So I'll go there, and if there's one disagreement, it doesn't get done. Imagine 10 directors with their own agenda, and I'm using this, and I'm requesting for some money. This money they can use for something else. So in those critical parts, if Jacob said something, it would have helped a lot, actually, right? But that's the internal thing. There's lots of internal duplication, right? A year after Global Innovation Department got set up. And so when the global, this is very serious in MTR, when it goes out, there's a memo that goes out, right? And it said, all innovation activities should be coordinated through global innovation. Should be coordinated, they should let Dan know, and this and that. Do you think that happened? No. Actually, it's the opposite. You know what's the opposite? So I'll hear from my vendors what we're doing. Because I'll ask, for example, we're doing green tech, right? So I'm asking our green tech people, hey, are we using this energy optimization solution? No. Guess what? I'm like, they're working with that vendor who I'm talking to do something. So they're actually not letting me know, because innovation is so important, right? Why would they let an outsider who doesn't know about signaling systems do this? Okay. And a year after that, one of our BUs, our core BU, Hong Kong Transport Services, set up their own innovation team. Okay. So it's just, right? And so in a way, in some ways, can you mandate something? Can you not? I mean, so I think what's important, for the board to know, there are some different incentives here, right? Because I just told you, engine one, engine two, by nature, they'll fight. And so you need to a bit overcompensate for engine two, otherwise it will die like that. And I'm a very determined person, right? So I was very determined, but even I was struggling, okay? And also very often in large organizations, do you think the best people with the skills get to do the job? My background is technology. I ran for Nokia. I know how to build mobile apps. And then MTR has a MTR mobile app. Do you think maybe I should run that? Maybe, right? Right? No, I couldn't even touch it, right? And it's such an important piece of the kind of the revenue source for MTR, right? So lots of times it is very hard. And I think the job of transformation, like chief digital officers, chief transformation, you walk in knowing your life might be short. And it is true. I mean, you look around, last time I called, after 3 years, thank you. But I think that point is the most critical point where you need to go, right? So that's the antibody, right? I mean, in a way, there's a mixture, right? You also need to find the trusted insider to run, right? A little bit of that balance. I'll call this the halfway house, okay? So because the systems are so different, right? On the one hand, okay, so we said, okay, as part of our transformation, we need to tap into the ecosystem of startups, okay? And MTR does like very large infrastructure projects, right? So it's very serious. You have to ask all the questions to invest. But then now we're talking about, are we going to invest in startups with like pre-revenue, right? And so the idea was, okay, you know what? It's a different kind of investment, right? Very clearly. So we need a new investment committee to do that. So that was very clear, right? I mean, does that make sense? You already decided to use the money to do that. And because the way you measure this, you need someone who knows technology, right? Comes from more of a VC background to be in that IC, right? So in other words, should you have the same investment committee who like approves large-scale traditional infrastructure projects for transportation, also be the same people deciding on whether or not you're going to do like that fintech or NFT investment? Clearly not, right? And so we push for that, but I think it's very hard sometimes for organizations. So in the end of the day for MTR Lab, the IC, what's your guess? It's the same IC. So it's the same IC. We tried very hard, but it's the same IC. The only thing they had an external technology advisor give some advice, but it's the same investment committee, right? So anyhow, these are the very practical things that come up, right? And I think sometimes the reason why many things fail, and this is not just transformation, is did you really try? I've been in many, many companies where like the top tells you, hey, please innovate. You'll try half-hearted. Because you can't blame me for not trying, right? I'm very busy, so I tried something. Of course it failed, because you didn't try. So I think that's the hardest thing to judge. Did you make a true try for it? If you make a true try, right? So anyhow, so with all that, how can the board help? All the things I wish the board, so I think number one, the things I just talked about, most of, I think, the board that I go to, they don't really know. Like Engine 2, like 01, nobody even knows that, right? So they don't know how to even help me, right? They don't know that it's a different system altogether, right? So how can you help? Some closing thoughts, and I think we can discuss a bit more, right? This is not about AI, but I think the macro environment speed is increasing, I think. And some have even said, right, and I think maybe this is more clear in the technology industry, some have said to me, Dan, we are now operating in an exponential age of change, exponential change, okay? So if you think about that, all of our governance mechanisms are linear. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a motivation or feeling, let me just wait and observe, right? So when the time is right, then I invest. But in exponential change, you can't time it that way. I heard somebody say this, I think it's said very well. If it's truly exponential change, you only have two choices. You can't time it. You're either too early or you're too late. And so if you didn't make a choice, you actually chose wait. And in some cases, right, you've chosen latter. So just be aware that's what you're doing, right? By not making a choice, you chose to wait. And you might be too late, okay? And lots of times, many of us are in traditional businesses, the threat is from outside, not inside. And so that's why, and they're playing a different game with you. They're doing something different, right? and they're employing 0 to 1 in a way that you cannot with all the baggage that you have, such as the baggage at MTR. The board, and I've had lots of chances proposing to the board. Actually, I set up some ventures with MTR, so I was on the board of some MTR ventures as well, right? And I think, of course, on the one hand, the board is not involved in the day-to-day and implementation, and so I know there's always a bit of a trade-off behind getting too involved in a way, right? But I think the board has a very important part to set the tone. What do I mean by set the tone? You have to change the habit. The whole organization is engine one, okay? And you need to be asking the questions, right, in order to keep that. Because if you don't do that, it's naturally going to go back, right, for everybody. Because in the end of the day, the innovation, there's the dilemma, you're fighting two systems, okay? And one normally will not win. It's a very, very deep topic. I mean, there's lots of, right? If there's one framework I think works, the one I've seen, it's not that well known, Zone to Win. If you're interested in that, go take a look at that book. It's actually from a board level, tells you how to do this strategy, right? And I think in a way that's actionable. It's quite a good one. Final slide. I think also manage your own expectation. Really, manage your own psychology. Because, and this is the reason why in the earlier poll, I said completed your journey. You will never complete this journey. It's ongoing. So there'll be different phases of the journey with different parts. And you need to ask yourself, when do you ask the question? If after 2 years you're challenging your CEO and the board, show me the results, you might have just killed it, right? But at the same time, I cannot guarantee to you, if you keep doing it this way, you'll be successful. That's the judgment call here, right? And I must also admit, the importance of Engine 2 depends a bit on the industry as well. Industry, individual, right? So, but there's a judgment call here. And I think there's a board level discussion. Do we need to start getting ready for this? Final thing, even CEOs are on contract. Even CEOs are on contract. So sometimes you need to protect your CEO. Because I think Jacob's worried too, right? I mean, he needs to extend his contract, and so if he does something that's not great, right, will he get the support needed? And this is also the reason why I think it's important for the board to kind of be aware, right? So maybe I'll leave it at that. I mean, that's kind of a little bit sharing, at least my journey through MTR. There's a lot of other similar stories. Each company is different, but there's some common learnings. I think there's some common learnings. This doesn't mean that this is the right way, but it's one attempt to try to build up a new system with governance that can then try to solve that innovator's dilemma. So maybe with that, I think, if any questions or comments. By the way, if you disagree, I think given so many of you are in the journey, I'd love to hear your experience too. Does it resonate, does it not? Right? I'm learning too every day.
That was a very good presentation. I'd just like to ask a question just to ensure that I understand one of the few slides you put on the screen. It's entitled Managing an Innovation Portfolio. And then you put down in percentage terms 10%, 20%, and 70%. So I believe most of the action is in 70%. Well, I'd like to know, out of curiosity, how much or how many achievements did you make in that disruptive innovation? Can you say that there was one thing that's now with the MTR, it was a disruptive innovation made by me? Can you say that or something?
Thank you. That's a very responsible question, and I've been asked that many times, right? And I would say this. So this chart is just sometimes rule of thumb in industry, right? I mean, so for example, any organization, like say I have $1 billion. How much dollars do I put into the different things? How many dollars do I put into trying Engine 2, right? And in the scheme of things, 200 million for MTR is like nothing, right? So it's just worthwhile to put some of that money into this. Actually, what takes more time is the management time, time of your people, right? And so your question was, okay, what were the results of the disruptive, of the 10%, right? And in short, I would say a bit early to tell, okay? It takes time to build a business, right? It takes some time you don't build a business in like a year or 2 years. And here's some examples, right? Are they successes or not? I'll let you judge. One is actually louder. So that went into production. So the idea is this. So this is a disruption in an Engine 2. So MTR, our basic business model is that we rent like space to tenants, right? We run them all, and so if you're like Sephora, if you're right, then you rent the space for 3 years. So that's our business model. It's just that simple, right? But if you think about it after COVID, should we have a different business model? So actually, the business model called Louder is that MTR will operate the store ourselves. So MTR will actually run the store and for the first time earn revenue from what we sell. So that's Louder, right? And it doesn't look like MTR, right? It's right. And so I think now it's been deployed in, I think, 6 malls, okay? So from a perspective of going into live production with a new business model, pretty successful. From the perspective of how much money is it bringing in, I'll tell you right now, I think it's like barely break even, okay? But the idea is that it's our first time running the store ourselves. It's the first time doing something we call online to offline, right? I can say a bit more what that was, but that's one example that went out, right? Another is this. Another is something called Carbon Wallet, okay? Carbon Wallet. And it's an application. If you go onto Hong Kong's App Store and you look, that's actually incubated like this, okay? And the whole idea, there are 2 purposes. One purpose was ESG, right? This is it's basically a reward program for sustainable behavior. So if you take MTR, you get some points. If you eat vegetarian, if you bring your own, right? So we do that. And, and so it's a reward program. So it's mainly for that. But then we also have some business models. So we actually, first time we work with corporates for their programs. And so we start getting some revenue, right? So some, but it's hard work. It's very hard work. The whole 4 years, I think I did 4 of these. So it's hard. From the perspective, was there money coming in? I mean, let's be honest here. For MTR revenue, but I think you're adding another option for your future. So we're feeling it in Hong Kong. So what's happening in Hong Kong now? Lots of the retail activity is going away in Hong Kong. Like in our malls, our traffic is going down, clearly. People are going to Shenzhen to spend money, and so now our stores are under some risk. In the old model, there's not much we can do about it, okay? But in this new model, then there's more space for us to try something different, right? So it's buying, so the whole idea here is you're buying yourself what's called option value. You have the option, so let's say Louder is starting to work, I'm gonna start putting more. But if you didn't do this, you wouldn't have that to do it. So you're adding more chips to what you can use. That's what this is, yeah. So mixed bag, depends how you measure the success.
Maybe 1 second.
Yes, please.
I appreciate your answer. Let's say I know a bit about Hong Kong. I'm a former Hong Kong regulator. I know quite a bit about MTR as well. I don't think it's a matter of money. A lot of things that's successful with MTR is circumstantial. It's a city, all the centralization, all the things are there which work for MTR, which might not exist somewhere else. But let's not go into that. But not necessarily in terms of money, but I think something magical did happen outside MTR by benefited MTR is the octopus card. The octopus card started out as what we might call a rail card, a travel card. You only use it when you use it to travel on a train or something. But unfortunately, legally wise, it came under the Department of Transport, so legally. So whereas the way to make money from octopus card, which is what it is now, octopus card is now like touch and go. It's not a general use card. It's just basically a cash card. You can use it in restaurants, you buy groceries, but that makes a big difference. Right? The scale, the population that use the card is not for real. So there was a transition from being just a rail card to mixed transportation card, which means you can use it on buses and up the tram to the thing, and then to the general use. But once it became a general use card, then the financial implication is a bit different. So because you use it for so many activities, the amount of liquid that you pump into the card each month, let's say, I don't know, from my understanding, a lot of my people in Hong Kong pump about 5,000 Hong Kong dollars. Not much in Hong Kong, but here in Hong Kong, 5,000 is nothing. So you average it out a month between 5,000 and 0, you get 2,500 Hong Kong. That's the float. And when you multiply the float by the number of users, and the users are guaranteed. Today, whether you like it or not, 10 million people travel the MTR, right? And they have to use the card just for the transport, but use it for whatever purpose. You can see the financial implication. Just for doing nothing, MTR has a float which they can easily put overnight in Hong Kong today in the interbank, I think, well, maybe 0.75%, or sometimes even 1 when the market is tight and pressure on the Hong Kong dollar. So, as you know, 1% daily rate, annual rate times 365% is a very good. But anyway, you gave a very good talk. I really enjoyed. Hope to see more of you, and maybe we can exchange.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
that.
so much.
I love that when we get like interaction. It makes it so much more fun for me. But I think just very quickly, like Octopus story is so interesting. Octopus is in trouble now. And so I was brought in to help look, because actually now in Hong Kong, it's all the QR codes coming in. It's like all that. And so even now in Hong Kong, before, the only way to get on MTR is Octopus. No. Now you have QR codes. And the credit card is coming too. So actually, in a way, this whole story about transformation, Octopus right now is right in the middle of that struggle. Anyhow, okay, sorry. Yeah. So there are a couple, maybe.
Hi, Dan. Sharon here. Thank you so much for the sharing. I finally feel that today, after your sharing, right, like I have the same sorrow with you because I walk the same path. We're doing digital transformation for a lot of companies, and we are always at the front, and we fail a lot of times, like O2O, OMO, fintech, launching e-wallets in market, and now AI. But my question to you is like, we have employees from the floor shouting for help. Like, we need to transform, we need to leverage on AI. However, the challenge is from the top management, which is refusing to accept, adopt, and even try. So this is my first question. The second question is a little bit personal on your end. It's like you're mentioning on the FOFB, which is fear of falling behind. So how do you yourself cope into all these transformation and revolutions in a daily basis, which I struggle. I do have a lot of anxiety when it comes to daily catching up with all these texts. Yeah,
thanks for that. Two questions. I mean, the first one is like, does the top understand? And I think, you know, if you think about like each level, I think it's also important for you to think about where they're coming from, right? Because in many ways, the board's responsibility, their responsibility is to maintain the ship, right? They're not there to take gigantic risk. If they take big risks, right. And there have been some CEOs, I mean, it's the history, that have actually gone very aggressive and then gone. Okay, really, like, well, I won't say which ones. The big one, like big, so there's no guarantee here. It's quite risky, right? And most folks in corporations, your job is to reduce risk. So the whole thing is quite difficult. And at the same time, you're not guaranteed success. There are some cases where this investment actually caused a drop faster, okay? And you don't know that before coming in. But I think the first step is that at least the board and C-level understand some of these trade-offs. I think in many cases, it's actually not well understood. Let me give an example, like failure. I actually didn't answer this, okay? Let me ask you, should you accept all failure? Clearly not. So one thing here is this. So I think, and this is, I think Jeff Bezos, who's Amazon, he's the most famous person for saying this, right? They're saying there are two types of failure. One type of failure, the board and CEO should reward. One type of failure, the board and the CEO should punish, okay? So one type of failure, and I forgot if it's called System 1 or System 2, right? One type of failure is that actually it's your core business. So if MTR is opening a new line in a new station, if it fails, the people responsible for that should be held accountable, okay? But then if you're doing some of this stuff, like you're doing like the meta station, and you get bad publicity, I think that actually, if you're learning something, should be encouraged. I think just even that understanding will help a lot, a bit of a safe space. So if you look at that, what this was, safe space for people to come in, right? Because your KPI, you're not held to your KPI, but you're held to learning, actually. That's actually more important, right? So if you think about it, when you're doing a project, are you trying to learn something or not? I think that's very explicit. The 0 to 1 is actually learning is the key. What's your learning rate, right? So anyhow, I think understand also the board and C, but I think some of this stuff, it's important for them to also know how to give you air cover, right? And it's hard, I mean, because you can't escalate everything and, you know, and then I must be honest, sometimes they don't have the time for you to explain. Sometimes you go and right? So anyhow, it is a process. It's also what makes it hard, which is also why today is great. I mean, so some of the board members are here, right? Number 2, personally, why do I keep doing this? I just like doing new things. And I think what keeps me going, if there's a chance for making a difference, it can. So for example, you know, like MTR, I think what was so attractive to me is because it's public and private, okay? And so if it is like okay, if there's one company that can make a difference in energy consumption of Hong Kong, and bring it down, I think it would be MTR. In certain hours of the day, MTR is Hong Kong's biggest energy user. So think about some of the technology I can use there. So as part of what I'm trying to do, if I can make a change there, I reduce it, I should make a difference. And so a little bit sometimes, you're right, I mean, that's why I put up with this, right? Otherwise, why bother, right? So anyhow, I keep coming back and doing it, right? But I do like it, right? Sorry. I don't know how to, maybe there? Okay, you have the.
Yeah, hi. Hi. Thank you, Dan, for the masterclass on transformation.
Not masterclass.
Yeah.
This is sharing pain.
This is actually
Not
a masterclass.
I'm not teaching
level.
anything. I'm just sharing
Yeah.
some pain.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, my name is Kang Soon. I'm a researcher, postgraduate researcher in organization behavior, organizational psychology. Right. So whatever that you say is actually correct. Now, you come from a relatively tech background, as you mentioned, right? Nokia. Samsung and also MTR, right? Now, you took this job, as you mentioned, for MTR because of the vision and also the aspiration of the CEO wants to be innovation. Now, supposedly that you are being trusted into a very traditional company. You're headhunted for that position. And of course, at the beginning, they will tell you, I want to do the innovation and stuff like that, right? You go in there and you find that it is very difficult. How do you actually convince your C-suites to be able to do the innovation that you want and get the results that you want? Because that is the first people that you're going to convince first, because you're going to disrupt their business and their operation and processes. What 3 tips can you give to us before you head to the door and says, look, this is not working?
Yeah, I think I won't give them tips, but at least tell you what I try to do, right? And what I try to do understanding it. And I think it's very true when they say digital transformation, it's not about the digital. It's all about like human factors. So I knew, despite what people say, right? I mean, the best intentions, do they trust me? You have to build some trust, right? For example, is Dan the guy fly in, take all the glory, leave? 2 years? I mean, is that right? So you need to, or is he gonna is he really trying to help? Right, so a lot of my work was I was trying to build some trust, even with the CEO, right? I mean, right? I mean, CEO or build the rapport, try to build some trust with my peers, right? And it's not easy, right? Because in the beginning, most won't trust you, okay? And so you're trying to find the people who give you a chance, basically, give you a chance, right? And then I try to embrace that chance, and I show them there's some trust, right? So I was very, very low key. If we do something, I'm not like the guy sending email, hey, like very in the back, okay? Actually, in the back sometimes my team is uncomfortable. It's like, hey, Dan, we did all that. How come you? So but I think in my mind, I felt so important. They trust, right? Because my objective, truly make a change, not necessarily glory, right? So, but again, you have to, so trust, I think trust is a big part of it. Number 2, I have to try very much understand each person's motivation. Right. I mean, because on the high level, everybody will support the initiative. But what is your, right? What's your initiative here? So, for example, when the competing organization was formed in Hong Kong Transport Services, I spent a lot of time trying to work with them, right? Just to show, right? So, not tips, but just some things I tried to do. So, trust. You try to build a bit of a track record, right? So, people who've tried that and they failed, they're not punished. Okay, and you kind of build them up, and you celebrate some small wins. And so after you do that, you try to then some of the tide starts turning, and then people start coming you out, right? And then it's just a bit of patience, kind of working with it, right? But a lot of time was spent working within the organization.
Hi, Dan. This I'm saying is not a question, but just an affirmation. MTR keeping its engine to alive with its continuous improvement in speed and efficiency, its new governance and improved processes. I might say it's a business survival skills. Yeah, the bigger picture of things speaks of business wisdom. And because MTR keeping its ears and eyes open and its technology and innovation for engine 2 and not taking China head on. Yeah, MTR transformation is business centric, tech centric apart from being innovative. So filling is not an option.
That's really good summary. Thank you for that. I think there were some more questions or comments. Yeah, it could be comments too. I mean, not just questions, that's just comments and sharing your experience, right? Yeah, but I can hear you. You can.
Yeah, I think you can hear. Oh, thank you. Right. Thanks, Dan, for it's really interesting sharing. I'm actually in sustainability. I'm Eileen, and I think from the past sustainability transformation projects I've done, I do recognize some of the same challenges. But I'm going to revert back and have this go back to a question of responsible business.
Yeah.
So my first question is, were the innovation projects that you were working on subjected to internal audit? That's one. And if yes, how did internal audit treat the iterative process? And how did you manage internal audit concerns?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, in big companies, there's lots of audits, especially a company like MTR, right? And I remember even like Jacob was reminding me, say, Dan, even like some of the safety like pilots, be very careful with those, right? And let them know. During the period of time, I think the process was audited. So we had like our auditing come in, and what they did is they kind of took a look at our process, the governance process, right? So they took a look at all the raw data materials. I mean, fortunately, because of the way we run, it was all online. We had an internal, like, so all the proposals that came in, all the meeting notes. Why did we reject one and accept another? What were all the milestones, right? So that was all in one place. So the audit was more, in a way, to try to help us maybe improve a little bit the process. I think they were quite open-minded because they understood. They went, this is a different process, different governance, so they weren't using the same lens. So they did come back and give us some suggestions in terms of better management and guidance there. Right, and I think it's a process too, because I think some of the proposals, okay, pretty good. Okay, so yeah, we didn't think about that, and it's a new process, right? And so we're kind of evolving as we go. On the other hand, there's also an education process, because they don't come from a background of agile development. They're not familiar with these ways of managing risk. So it's also a chance for me and my team to then educate them, like, look, it's a different way. But I must say, it's a bit of a hurdle, because if most people don't come from an innovation or transformation background, and they're not familiar with these concepts. I mean, this whole idea of 0 to 1. I mean, people hear that, they think they understand what it is. Most folks don't. And I said as well, even some practitioners. I've asked some practitioners, I won't say who. I said, oh, how do you solve the innovator's dilemma? They don't know actually what that is, right? And it's understandable, because most people who are doing this, they're put into this job on the job. They're not trained in this, right? So it's not an easy thing at all. And I'm sure there's a reason you asked that question. Anyhow, we can talk a bit more like during break, and I'll share some of the stuff that we did.
Can I have maybe the last question? Thank you very much, Dan. I'm Carol Wong. Thank you very much for very good sharing. I just wonder, right, it seems that would you have done it differently if you have known that the key challenge is not really coming up with a next octopus, but it's more about processes and culture?
Yeah. No, I always, you go through anything, you always want, like, so many things I wish I did differently, right? But actually, there's one thing, I knew the challenge up front. So actually, that was clear. So what to do, and right, I might have done the governance system differently, but I walked in knowing I have to introduce a new system, right? And which is different, and in some ways opposite from the existing one. So from that perspective, it was set up. I mean, there are different ways to do it, right? So the way that we did it here, I don't think that necessarily is the only way. But I think it's more the core challenge. There needs to be a new system. Because if there isn't like a boundary and different governance, because you still have to govern it and manage and measure, then I said, don't even bother. You're just wasting everybody's time. Then do a hackathon and do a lunch and learn, and you're done, right?
And second question, I just wonder, would you recommend that we should do like a separate startup organization to be the innovation center rather than within the organization? Just a question from your experience.
Yeah. So I think your question is, should a separate organization be set up just like Global Innovation Department to run it, or should you find one of your trusted lieutenants that knows nothing about innovation to run it, right? Okay, I'll give the correct answer, and then I'll give like my personal view, okay? Each organization is different, right? And so it just really, I mean, and that's very true. Each one, you have to kind of see within this, who is the person who can do it in the best way? Because on the one hand, you do need new skills coming in, right? But any new person coming in will like come into like the antibody response, right? And at the same time, you have a trusted person, but this trusted person is busy running the core business. And do they even understand how to manage this, right? So there's always a bit of a trade-off, okay? So each company is different. There's a study that says this. I think if you have to choose, find the trusted insider and support that insider. The trusted insider that's willing to learn, really willing to do this, right? Because it comes down to the trust question. What I found lots of times, I was not given the trust at the end. You do it and just, yes, I have a bit of a track record, but are you gonna like go double down, right? And, you know, but I think that the practical problem then becomes, you can't just find any insider. I mean, which insider can run this? Which insider actually has the skills to talk with startups, so, right? So a little bit maybe, like again, if you can find that insider who, number one, is willing to learn, has some of the capability, and I think really for this painful, this person must be really willing to do this, okay? If you can find that person, supplement that person with somebody like me. And then you have a better chance for success, right? So maybe that's a little bit, right? Not a great answer, but that's maybe 2 levels to think about it. So I just undersold myself, right?
Hello. Hi, Dan. Joseph here. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm a HR person. So I was in glove manufacturing and we did this similar.
Yeah.
So you have this disruptive as well as 1+N. But I learned today regarding the funding 70-20-10, so I really appreciate that. One of the challenge we had when we did it is we felt that sometimes innovation can be an enemy of quality, especially on the 1+N. Maybe a comment there. And second comment maybe is, how does the board that is probably more here be a player in terms of encouraging, let's say, innovation or AI, or taking that kind of risk from your experience?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because I think you asked the question is, you know, like, right, is innovation equal like low quality, right? And this goes to, I was going to do that slide, the innovator's dilemma. That's exactly that question, because it's so hard for us to like break our habit, right? Isn't high quality better than low quality, right? But I would tell you, if you're doing 0 to 1 innovation, in the beginning, it will be low quality in some places. And that's just the nature of it. You know, if, in my experience, if you find yourself like each time high quality, that's great. You're doing 0 to 1 incremental innovation, perfect, right? But you're not doing the other engine at all. So I think just realizing that, right? And so I think, you know, as relates to innovation, you do want it to kind of get into high quality over time, but it's going to be a process, right? AWS, 10 years, right? So it's going to be a process. In the beginning, I guarantee you, it's going to be low quality, and that's where most things die. I mean, in the startup world, it's called the valley of death, right? I mean, so you come and it's low quality, and then all the responsible managers come and say, hey, this is low quality, low margin, unproven, dead, right? So unless you have some support from like the board and C, unless they're supporting you, you're already dead. I think that's the thing, right? That's why it's so hard, right? All these very responsible questions goes against the habit.
Since this is a question from a glove manufacturer, I'd like to say that I'm the chairman of the audit committee of Supermax. We're the world's second largest glove manufacturer. We produce about daily 25 billion gloves a day. I think we were pushed into innovation. I think in a few years ago, we were threatened by International Labour Organization that we were not paying our workers proper wages. We were paying the Bangladeshis developing country wages. So we now have to pay world grade wages. And that leaves us in a dilemma because the cost-benefit analysis, analysis formulation changes. So we have no choice but to say that, look, we have to move from labor to automation. And then, without going to details about the geopolitical conflicts, I say that these have led us to developing the next factory that we will produce. We already have 20 factories in Klang producing, and they are clearly not economical by any innovative standard and today's world price. but to carry our innovation further, our latest iconic factory is in Houston, Texas. It will produce, when it's fully fruitful and produce, about 45 billion gloves. In the meantime, you'll be surprised that it is fully humanoids, robotized and automated. And I think if you see 6 persons in the factory, they're actually walking up and down the computer or IT corridor, just making sure that the computers that or the automotive things that run the factory are actually operating properly. So that trying to answer him how innovation has changed the world or disrupted the world of glove manufacturing, and in our case it was forced upon us, requiring us to pay world labor standard prices and not pay them Bangladeshi wages. Thank you. I'm answering your question.
Well, that's a great example, right? You can't predict that massive change. So that change changed the whole game. And then when that happens, do you have something right to add on top of that? Sorry, I know we're going over time. There was a question here. Yeah. And by the way, I'll stay here just to chit chat afterwards. So anybody need to leave, please feel free to leave.
Yes.
But I'll be staying as long. Yeah.
I just have 2 questions actually. At the start of your presentation, you talk about responsible management and the investment criteria, and a few have already talked about it. But here, in the board's perspective, when it comes to that investment criteria, it's not going to be met. And we have a lot of issues here in Malaysia when you are in PLCs, and particularly if you are in the GLC, and it comes to question why those investments were actually approved and allowed to go on for so long when it wasn't really making the good investment returns that it should within that short time frame. So that's one question on how would you think a board would need to manage that under responsible management. My second question is about you had in slide 25, I think, this, your criteria for success of innovation. And I think one of the, I face similar processes like that, similar criteria like that in the organization that I sit on board. And I think that's a flaw because it doesn't stop, it shouldn't stop into how many IPs you have, that's one, because you can have many, many IPs, like in an organization that I'm on board, but where's the money, right? The second one is when it gets into gets into the business units, and you say how many gets into the business units, and then the most you can get is efficiency and cost savings. But I think there's more to it than that there should be a KPI on, or a measure of success on commercialization of those. And I think you talked about the store. That's the commercialization, but that's still within. How do you get that to market like octopus? Right. So what is that step to go into commercialization of innovation? And to me, that's the key success, not just having it into the business unit or having number of IPs in your organization.
Yeah. It's really good. Maybe I'll respond to the KPI one first. So all those are correct. The issue that you'll run into is timing. So by the time the KPI of like revenue makes sense, it might be 5 years later. So the issue is that before you get to 5 years, like will you kill it? So for example, look at like Louder, okay? If you look at the Louder's revenue and P&L now, and by the way, Louder's been done 3 years. 3 years now. If you look at even now, from MTR perspective, kill it. It's not bringing any money, but that's exactly the wrong time to kill it, right? Because it gives you that option value. So I think all those are well known, like cost reductions, savings. It's a matter of time. And will you wait 5 years, right? As a responsible board member, like really, I can imagine like the 5 annual board meetings, AGMs, and you keep letting it go. And so a little bit my opinion is, if you really want to do this in today's world, I think you need to, as responsible board and C-level and corporation, you need to put in a little bit of your budget for disruptive each year. Just do it. 5, and that is measured in a different way. And you have to make the decision, is 10% something you're willing to provide some insurance for the future? And so, in other words, if you're not doing like that project this year, it's another project, right? So there's a continuous investment. And because I think it's always, I've seen it too many times in the past 10 years. Yeah, it's like responsible management. That's why I showed that. It's irresponsible. So you know, now you've done it for 3 years, and the revenue is not moving the needle, right? And that will take away your ability to pivot when things change. Yeah, so there's no perfect answer here, right? So I think the first thing I think my opinion, world has changed. You better have the portfolio. You better have something in there you're ready to go. And it's not something you can follow. I mean, by the time it's so clear, you're already behind the curve, and you should be on the next wave, right? That's the trick. And it requires a bit of patience and actually, to be honest, determination from the board. And is the board, for example, if I was a board member, I'd be asking management team, are you taking 10% of your profits on this? Show me what are the projects. Are you doing it each year, right? Because if you don't ask that, lots of cases, they won't do it. Like, I'm Jacob, the CEO. My contract is due next month. So will I take that chance, right? Anyhow, so a bit of a long, I mean, again, personal opinion. So maybe.
Yes,
okay.
yes. Thank you so much, Dan, for your very convincing and comprehensive sharings. For those who have questions, you may directly connect with Dan from LinkedIn, or he will be here, so don't worry. So before we end our program, I would like to request your time for 3 minutes to give your feedback to us by scanning the QR code on the screen. The certificate of participation will be issued to you, and you can also collect the certificate within your ICDM Plus portal. And then, and that's that. And while you're doing that, we have an announcement to be made. Do check out our public program in March 2025, the Protecting Your Organization from Financial Crimes is Your Board line with AMLA by Dr. Yi Han Lik, adjunct professor, certified trainer of AML, CFTSB, and Bank Negara, which will be held virtually on 21st March 2025. And the next program will be the do's and don'ts of KPI and performance monitoring from the boards on 17 April. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you for all audiences. We shall meet you all in our upcoming programs. Thank you.